Are you ready to face your biggest fear? Subscribe, like, and grab a cup of coffee as we dive deep into a terrifying yet enlightening near-death experience.
Our car landed wheels up and roof crushed on the concrete guardrail, teeter-tottering over the edge of the cliff. I had the 101% belief that we were going to go over the cliff. I just decided in that split second, I'm going to die. At first it was just this real sense of familiarity. This sense of familiarity, like, I've been here before. I want to share a little bit about my near-death experience in 2017, so I'll jump right in. I was 35 years old. I was the passenger in a car driving on a high mountain road in Canada, and the road was like this, and the mountain went straight up like that, and then there was a concrete guardrail on this side, and then a big drop. And basically, another car came in our lane, and we lost control, swerved onto the gravel shoulder, and it all happened really fast. But as soon as we swerved onto the gravel shoulder, we completely started spinning and losing control. And our car ended up hitting another car that was behind the first one and flipping upside down. And we landed wheels up and roof crushed on the concrete guardrail. And so we were kind of teeter-tottering, I guess you could say. Where we landed, we were teeter-tottering over the edge of the cliff. What happened for me was, was extremely life-changing. So as soon as our car lost control, it was a very split second, but I had the 101% belief that we were going to go over the cliff. I had worked as a paramedic in that area for a long time, and it was very well known that if there's a bad crash, the car just flies over the edge of the cliff. Everyone dies. That's just the way it is there. So as soon as we lost control on that shoulder, I closed my eyes and I leaned back in my seat and I relaxed all my muscles, and I just decided in that split second, I'm going to die peacefully. Just like a plane is going off, you're just like, okay, I'm letting go. And what happened was a total surprise. So even though this accident was like a couple of seconds in Earth time, what happened for me was like a pause on Earth time and a complete out-of-body experience. So as soon as I closed my eyes and let go of control and surrendered, I started to, one by one, things started to happen. I first lost my hearing. It was as though someone put earplugs in my ears. My eyes were closed, but there was almost like a deep, denser darkness that kind of set in. And there was a lightness where there was no sensation in the body. There was no heaviness, density, contraction, tension, all the things that are just so normal to being human. There was suddenly this huge lightness where I didn't have a body. And it felt like I was out of the body and floating in this beautifully comfortable, secure, safe, pillowy, feathery, black, kind of contained cave, I guess you could say. And as soon as I got there, I had the deepest sense of peace and just all security, all safety, everything was suddenly perfect in the way that I guess what we're all longing for is just kind of like that deep sense of perfection and peace and home. And suddenly I was there. And I didn't start to get visits from angels or Jesus or any of this kind of stuff. At first it was just this real sense of familiarity. The sense of familiarity, like, I've been here before. I've been here before, and I've passed through this place many times in between lives, and I don't call it heaven. I like to call it like the threshold of higher dimensions or something like that. But it was like a greeting room, almost like a waiting room, a place where you get to be welcomed, and reunited. And I didn't actually see any specific beings, but it seemed like I had this feeling as though I was being surrounded by many. There was like a knowing that I was being surrounded by many. It felt like presence of many people, or maybe many beings, because I couldn't quite make them out. It was very dark in there, but I was definitely not alone. And as I started to take that in, and again, this is happening in like a few seconds, but Earth time was paused, and there was this whole situation. I started to feel the emanation, the kind of like a telepathic welcome, you could say, of all of these beings. And it was like just so much joy in seeing me and reconnecting with me. There was a sense of familiarity, as though I knew all of these beings. Maybe they were soul family. I don't know. I can't think of like a good word to use, but I was known by these beings. These beings knew me more than just, say, one lifetime. These are people that, angels, beings that I've been connected to through many lives. There was like a unbelievable acceptance and deep knowing of each other that surpassed any kind of human relationship I've ever had in this life as Amanda. It was like these people actually know me. It was like they could see inside to my soul, and they could see not just like this life as Amanda, but they could see all of the different characters that I'd ever been. And there was a complete understanding and knowing and happiness in kind of coming together. So no filters, just soul, but with a lot of like characteristics and stories and personalities. And so with that, I get a kind of shivers talking about it, because to be seen, not just like your physical appearance, but to be like seen at a soul level by so many people that have loved you so many times, is like a very overwhelming experience that can change someone's life forever. And so there was a deep familiarity, and almost like a telepathic, there was no words, I didn't hear any specific words, but it was almost just like, we're so glad to see you again. This is such a special moment. This is such a special opportunity to come together. And I didn't experience these beings as like higher or more important than me. When I was in that place, it was the higher self, the higher aspect of who I was, my personality, my body, my story as Amanda was like in that car in the accident, and I was like, the best parts of me were up here with the best parts of these beings. And so there was like not like a hierarchy or of any sort. It was like, we are seen and known as who we truly were. So an experience like that brings a lot of knowing who I really am, and knowing that like this temporary life on earth is really just like a story. It's a set of experiences. It's beautiful. But beyond that, there is a whole other story. And being known inside and out with like any so-called mistakes or quirks or idiosyncrasies, like at that level, no one cares about those things. I didn't care about those things in what, I was perceiving with them, because that's all earth stuff. And they didn't care about those parts of me. And so it was literally just like essences of God, the qualities of divinity in each one of us, although individual and unique, like not a bunch of blobs of oneness, like literally like our stories weave together. And in a higher perspective like that, I could sense like the appreciation for like all of the lives and the circumstances and the relationships that we'd had together in many earth lives, and just how meaningful it actually all had been to develop our souls up to that point of where we met. So time passed where I was just kind of like taking all this in, this welcome, this acceptance, and but very like special to my experience was like a knowing of who I really was beyond my earth incarnation, knowing that there was actually so much more than just my job, just the things I had done, good or bad, just the way that I looked, just the way, you know, that I went about in the world as Amanda, that there is actually just so much more that is part of all my lives, you know, same with everybody else, that goes with us from life to life, which is, you know, the soul. And those things are eternal. Those things are eternal. And so that knowing and acceptance of myself, as these beings were accepting me and welcoming me and knowing me, it reminded me that I can also feel that way about me as well as all of them. So that would be like, I guess, one way of looking at oneness, where like a massive connection, but we still have like some individuality based on the different lives we've had and our stories. So I was just kind of taking all this in, and it was so freeing. And it was just so liberating to know that there's so much more to us than just what we see and do on Earth. And then suddenly I was awake and I was upside down in my car, looking at upside down trees going straight down, like 700 feet. And my hearing started to come back. I could hear metal crunching and crashing, people yelling. And yeah, basically my five senses returned, but I was still pretty blissed out, to be honest. So it was like one of the most dangerous days of my entire life, if not the most. And yet I'm hanging upside down in this car, and I've just been like home, you know, or on my way home with this greeting committee from my true home. So none of this kind of stuff mattered, because I realized that I exist in or out of the body, not really. There's no less or more of me in or out of the body, so this doesn't really matter. Although my partner who was driving the car and the people who were the bystanders definitely thought and experienced differently. My partner didn't have an out-of-body experience. In the years after, as this opening would kind of continue, I started to remember things from my earlier life, child life, that I had completely blocked out. So if you asked me this question when I was like 35, I would say no, I don't have a connection, never had a connection to the spiritual world. But with this remembering in general, remembering who I am a little bit, and remembering, you know, suppressed traumas, I also started to remember experiences that I'd had as a child. So the first one that came back to me, I was 3 or 4 years old. I was living in a house where I had my own room, and I would wake up many times in the night where I had been having some pretty severe nightmares. And when I would wake up in the middle of the night, I would wet the bed, and I could also sometimes still see with my physical eyes the beings from my nightmare in my room. And so it was like the nightmare didn't end even though I woke up. So I was, as a kid, really able to be in that middle space. And sometimes the reason I would wet the bed was because like the being that I could see in the room was between me and the bathroom, and I was too afraid to like head to the bathroom. So I had a lot of stuff like that going on, and I'm glad it got blocked out, because that's just, you know, too much for a kid to be carrying around. Although, even though those specific memories got blocked out, the deep-seated fear of the unknown and being alone in a spiritual dimension. I think that trauma did get stuck in my body because as a kid and a teenager, especially as a kid up until about age 8, I dealt with a lot of paranoia, terror, and anxiety. And yeah, it was just something that I couldn't really put to words because I knew that the adults in my life weren't going to really understand what I was talking about. So I kept it to myself and I really suffered. And then when I was 14, a very different spiritual experience. This one I didn't block out. I kind of forgot about it, to be honest. I forgot about it, but then like when I started to remember it after my near-death experience, it kind of came back with like all the feeling and the knowing. So when I was 14, I was in a church service, actually, and they were playing a lot of music for a long time. And I had just kind of like this overwhelming feeling in my body. Now, this wasn't an out-of-body experience. It was as though I could sense beings around me that were not human. I couldn't see them, I couldn't describe what they looked like, but they were just emanating love at me. So the church music's playing, nobody else seems to be able to notice this, and I was so overwhelmed with love from the beings around me in this church that I just started crying, and I ended up going outside of the church to this kind of quiet room, and I still could hear the music. I could feel the presence, and I don't know how long I was in that quiet room. It could have been hours, and I was just kind of like sitting on the floor in humility because it was so overwhelming. And so around that time, if you ask me, I would say I definitely believed in God. I think the near-death experience for me, it transcended any religious sect, any specific religion, you got to do it this way in order to get into a good afterlife. It was so much beyond all of the fear-based and ritualistic stuff. It was like when I popped out of my body and to the beyond, it had a lot more to do with who I am as a soul rather than following a certain religion in order to like access a certain dimension, saying a certain prayer, doing a certain practice. I think a lot of those things can help get us in alignment with our soul. So whatever works for people to get really in alignment with their soul. But at the end of the day, we're gonna get and go what we're a match to, just like in regular life. I didn't think of myself as someone who was afraid of death, but suddenly there was really like an extra comfort and an extra trust around the topic of death. And I didn't notice it quite at first, but all of these shifts started to happen in me. Like I no longer was worried about a lot of the little worries that you worry about in life. Like I just knew that no matter what happened, everything would be okay. And in the year following the accident, I started to make a lot of changes in my life. The first thing that happened was I realized that not very many people really understood what I was talking about or what I had experienced, so I was kind of careful who I spoke to. I started volunteering at a hospice. I wanted to talk to people who were dying because I knew that, people who are in like the dying process, they are often kind of in and out of consciousness, in and out of the other side. And I really found that I could understand what these people were talking about, and being with those people and hearing what they were experiencing and seeing as they became comfortable talking to me even bolstered my own faith some more in the existence of that other side, because they were saying similar things as I had experienced. And I started to have different preferences started to set in really quickly. I didn't care so much about accumulating material items, and I didn't care so much about competition and comparing myself to other people, and all these things that I didn't really realize were going on, but they suddenly were really not important to me at all. And I ended up leaving my partner in that year. We were just no longer on the same page, and we had been together for 13 years, so that was pretty significant. And then I sold the house, and I gave away and sold most of the belongings in that house. For the next 2 years, I lived in my RV and spent a lot of time camping and visiting friends I hadn't seen in a long time, and basically worked on myself. I had really never spent too much time other than the busy Western life, and I wanted to spend time in nature. I wanted to reconnect with the spiritual side of myself through meditation and praying and just walking through the trees and that kind of thing. And I know that this experience, even though it was so brief, it changed so many things, and I never really went back to the way that I was before. I mean, it's been about 5 years, and I still live out of I'm traveling, and I live out of a suitcase, and I have everything that I need with me all the time. Still, I'm working on my trauma coaching business that I do online, and some volunteer work, and still at it, still learning, still growing, but holding on to what I learned in that experience about surrendering, at the moment where something is out of my control, and letting go of the outcome as often as possible, and not attaching too tightly to the material world, the physical things of this world, just being grateful for having my needs met, and yeah, that's where I'm at today. But it's been a lasting experience for me. It was life changing for sure.